a silence opens first. Beneath every thought there is a breath that does not seek, a stillness that refuses the tyranny of wanting. Into that silence I speak the first piercing truth. Your craving is your captivity. Every desire you feed only tightens its chain, for the will is endless, never satisfied. This is no moral indictment, only a constancy you cannot escape, the machinery of your own nature. In that quiet, something shifts. The mind, stilled by recognition, pauses. From here, the world re-emerges, not as a promise, but as a mirror of despair. You move through days, believing fulfillment will come somewhere, sometime, but the present mutely asks, have you ever tasted enough? Every achievement, every accolade, momentary respite, nothing stays, nothing grips. You chase illusions, they fade. You build a self, it dissolves. You pursue meaning, it recedes. This suffering is no accident. It is the punctuation of existence, the dark punctuation that gives shape to your awareness. Let me show you the anatomy of this suffering, not to heal you, but to reveal its logic. You believe that if only things were different, more success, more approval, more comfort, you would be freed. But comfort breeds craving. Approval hardens the ego's hunger. Success becomes another ladder to climb. The illusion is, the world can gift you what you already lack, and yet the world only offers reflections of your own insatiability. The futility here is breathtaking. One more victory can never fill the emptiness that demand leaves behind. Pause now. The relief inherent in awareness. It feels painful resigning yourself to lack, but in that very resignation there is rest. For when you stop chasing, the will does not roar so loudly. Not forever, but enough to notice the space. That space is not reward, it is the undisturbed background of your being. It is what remains when desire drops its masks. In that space, the sorrow of all your seeking settles as sediment. It does not go away, but loses its sting. Modernity reeks of optimism. The promise that technology, status, love, causes will fix the wound. But in every ideology there lies a subtle narcotic, the belief that you are incomplete, broken, and someone or something will fix you. This belief feeds suffering, not alleviates it. You are not broken, you are finite. The will is suffering. The endless dance of wanting is your anatomy. To awaken is not to repair something. It is to see clearly the circuitry of your own unrest. Look at culture. Every advertisement whispers of joy at the end of the purchase. Every social feed pulses with curated satisfaction. Every ideology demands loyalty in exchange for meaning. And those meanings all evaporate upon scrutiny. The self that identifies with them dies sooner or later, only to arise anew, seeking again, cycle upon cycle. The modern soul is exhausted not because something is missing, but because it ignores what is already present. Suffering is not outside, it is inside, structured by thought, expectation, habit. The momentum is relentless until the seeing happens. After every 2 or 3 minutes of recognition, feel the release. You see the abyss, yet you are not falling. You see the machinery, you see your illusions laid bare. There is relief in that clarity. Not final, but precious. Every small moment when craving stops, that is a peak of awareness, a fleeting edge of peace. In this illumination, you learn detachment, not as denial, but as sober neutrality. The world still moves, people still suffer, you still breathe, but now you no longer feed the will's frantic ache. You welcome calm as the quiet audience to your own breath. The end of attachment is not ecstasy, it is sobriety. A sober mind feels the chill, the ache, the longing, but does not recoil or attach. It holds the whole without choosing. And then, spiritual sobriety, at the end, not because you have it figured out, but because you see the nothingness behind all facade. The candle dims, not extinguished, but reduced to a steady glow. Desire retreats to peripheral. The soul stands in that glow, fragile, delicate, finally unshielded by illusions. This is not victory, it is surrender. Not triumph, but release. There is no epiphany, only the gradual fading of the need to run. Awareness becomes the only companion. Suffering remains, but you are no longer its victim. The world is still illusion, still momentary, still painful, yet you walk through it as witness. Not because something changed outside, but because your relationship to it did. And at the very end, words dissolve. The voice withdraws into the space it once occupied. Not triumphant, not hopeful, only still. The viewer meets the gaze that has no reflection. The screen is empty, and you remain, lucid and unenchanted, awakened enough to feel sorrow without being swallowed by it. Suffering is not the interruption of life, it is life. Pleasure flickers like lightning across a blackened sky, but pain is the storm itself. We do not fall into suffering, we awaken into it. The child first cries not from joy, but from the shock of existence. The body hungers, the heart aches, the mind strains all testaments to the tyranny of the will. No creature escapes this theater of need, for to be alive is to be yoked to the command of desire. You seek love, not to give it, but to silence the gnawing absence. You want to be seen, not for who you are, but to escape the terror of being invisible. Even the pursuit of peace becomes another effort of the will, a new disguise for craving. This is the root of illusion, that something outside you will still the storm within. But the storm is not a visitor, it is the atmosphere itself. What we call joy is but the brief cessation of pain, a momentary exhale in the suffocating grip of need. We believe the moment will last, and this belief births disappointment. For even the sweetest kiss, the deepest rest, the brightest laughter all pass, nothing abides. And so we are left again with the truth beneath. The thirst returns, the will reawakens, the ache resumes its rhythm. The illusions are manifold, shimmering like heat waves across the desert of longing. Achievement whispers of meaning. Romance promises transcendence. Belief offers stability, but each, when attained, collapses into the same hollowness. The object is reached, but the hunger is not stilled. The will merely shifts its gaze. In this, there is no malice, only inevitability. To know this is to begin to see clearly. Not to flee life, nor curse it, but to look at it with unwavering eyes. The mind recoils, for its instinct is to hope. But hope, too, is a subtle cruelty. It stretches the suffering across time, promises what cannot be delivered. In killing hope, one does not kill the future, but the hallucination of its salvation. And in that death, a peculiar peace begins to bloom. Detachment is not numbness, it is intimacy without possession, presence without craving. It is to walk among illusions and no longer bow to them. One still feels the ache, the longing, but does not build a home in them. One still loves, but without clinging, still mourns, but without drowning. Detachment is the maturity of sorrow, the ripening of despair into stillness. And so you become quiet, not from fear, but from knowing. You watch others dance in the dream, and you do not interfere. Their suffering is their path, their illusions, necessary shadows. You once walked there, too. And you know now that even awakening is not escape. It is only the end of self-deception. You do not rise above the world, you simply stop sinking. You float in the clarity of resignation, not as defeat, but as lucidity. The world remains what it is, restless, empty, cruel and beautiful. But you are no longer trying to make it love you, save you, complete you. You have stopped asking it for what it cannot give. And in this stillness, a silence deeper than words begins to open. A silence not of absence, but of presence, so vast, it no longer needs to speak. You sit with your sorrow, and it no longer frightens you. You breathe with your longing, and it no longer commands you. You watch the will surge and subside, and you no longer identify with its movements. You are not free, you are only awake, and that is enough. The soul, once stripped of illusion, no longer clamors for resolution. It sees the world not as an error to be corrected, but as a mirror to be understood. Suffering, far from being an aberration, is the texture of consciousness itself, woven into every breath, every gesture, every desire. It does not arrive, it has always been. We distract ourselves with narratives of progress and healing, but these are only the soft costumes we place over the hard bones of existence. The will does not mend. It repeats, it returns, it demands again. One wakes each day not to promise, but to pressure. The body must be fed, the mind soothed, the heart appeased. These duties are not heroic, they are merely survival. And in that repetition lies the proof of the will's tyranny. The animal, the artist, the ascetic, each is driven by the same root impulse to escape pain, to taste a moment's rest from the gnawing dissatisfaction that echoes behind all experience. Even the saint, in his renunciation, pursues a silence he has not yet found. What we call virtue is often only the more sophisticated form of flight. The masses live suspended in dream, not because they are foolish, but because consciousness is a burden too sharp for constant touch. Illusion is a mercy. Distraction is a balm. If the veil were lifted completely, most would shatter under the weight of the void. The noise of the world, its music, its conflict, its commerce, is not accidental. It is the necessary murmur that drowns the emptiness. The real is too stark, too still. It demands nothing, and in that nothing, the ego sees its death. To look directly at existence is to stand without armor in a storm that never ends. The truth is not cruel, it is indifferent. The sun does not rise for you. The stars do not guide you. The world does not hear your cries. And yet, this very indifference is what frees. For in relinquishing the fantasy of specialness, the soul becomes anonymous again, as it was before identity imprisoned it. This anonymity is not nihilism, it is liberation from self-deception. You are not the center. You are not owed joy. You are not here for a reason. You simply are. And yet the ache persists, that soft, inescapable throb at the center of being. It is not always violent. Often it is quiet, like a weight behind the eyes, a tiredness that sleep cannot cure. You smile when required, work when commanded, engage when expected. But beneath it all, there is a slow erosion, the fading of novelty, the dulling of once bright hopes. You once believed in things, in love, in future, in justice. Now you watch those beliefs curl and crack like paper in firelight, not out of bitterness, but because they have exhausted themselves. Love, too, reveals its double edge. At first, it seems a doorway out of solitude, but it soon becomes a mirror of it. You see in the other what you long to be seen for. You give in order to receive. You hope they will heal what you cannot. But love cannot cancel the will. It can only mask it, briefly. Two beings chained to their own cravings cannot liberate each other. They can touch. They can ache together. But the hunger remains, now divided, now doubled. Even pleasure betrays. Not because it is false, but because it decays. What once thrilled becomes ordinary. The body tires of sensation, the mind of novelty. The more one consumes, the more elusive satisfaction becomes. The appetite grows faster than the feast. And so we turn to memory, to imagination, to distraction, any echo of intensity that might delay the return of the dull ache. But it always returns. The pleasure fades, the will stirs again, the cycle continues. And so one begins to detach, not out of choice, but from weariness. The world has not changed, but you no longer chase it. You let go, not to become holy, but because you see the chasing leads nowhere. You speak less, you expect less, you offer less of your soul to what cannot hold it, not as retreat, but as refinement. What remains is quiet, sparse. A few gestures, a few truths, a few breaths. Detachment is not coldness. It is a deeper form of caring one that does not require outcome. You walk beside the suffering of others, but you no longer try to rescue them with illusions. You understand the architecture of their pain, for it mirrors your own. You see them clinging, as you once did, to dreams that cannot hold their weight. You offer presence, not promises, stillness, not solutions. And in that offering, something real is shared, fragile, temporary, unadorned. What is left when desire quiets? Not bliss, not void, but clarity. A clarity so sharp it feels almost cruel until you realize it is the first taste of honesty. The world does not owe you joy. Your pain is not unjust. Your loneliness is not a failure. These are not punishments. They are simply the cost of consciousness. The more clearly you see this, the less frantic your search becomes. You no longer beg for answers. You begin to dwell in the questions. To live without illusion is not to live without beauty, but the beauty changes. It is no longer loud, no longer possessed. It flickers at the edges, in the silence between words, in the slow decay of autumn, in the honesty of a tear not wiped away. Beauty becomes less something to acquire, more something to witness. And in witnessing, you no longer grasp, you simply see, and seeing, finally, is enough. You still suffer, but you do not suffer wrongly. The pain no longer feels like a punishment, but a condition, like the weather or gravity. It is not something to fix, but something to carry, with care, with patience, with dignity. You do not ask it to end, you ask only that it not turn you cruel. And sometimes, on quieter days, you thank it for breaking the illusion that anything here could ever be permanent. And in that gratitude so strange, so solemn, there is the faintest echo of peace. Not because suffering is gone, but because the resistance to it is gone. You no longer fight the waves, you float. And though the sea is dark and cold and endless, you are no longer drowning. The ego, once vast and demanding, grows small in this new awareness. It still speaks, but its voice no longer dominates. You hear it like distant thunder, familiar, inevitable, but no longer commanding the sky. You allow it, its murmurs, but you no longer follow. It wants more, it always will. But you, finally, do not. You do not need to be whole. You do not need to be healed. You do not need to be known. These were stories. Tender, yes. Human, yes. But stories nonetheless. Now you live beneath the story in the raw immediacy of being. Each moment is not a step toward meaning. It is the meaning. Each breath, not a vehicle for achievement, but an end in itself. You move not to arrive, but because movement is what remains. And this, perhaps, is the softest truth, that nothing is coming. No great resolution, no final embrace, no thunderclap of understanding, just this breath, this stillness, this slow, flickering awareness. And if that is not enough, then nothing will be. But if it is enough, just enough, then for the first time, you are not chasing. You are here, fully, finally, simply, here. The moment the chase ends, the silence grows heavy, not with dread, but with truth. What you fled was never the world, but yourself. The inner architecture of longing, the restless theater of thought, the compulsive urge to matter. When you stop running, the echo of your own footsteps returns to you, and you realize the distance you tried to create was only illusion. There was never anywhere else to go. You were always alone with the will. The modern world teaches that solitude is failure, that to be alone is to be unloved, unseen, unfinished. But this too is deception. Solitude is not the absence of others, it is the absence of illusion. When the mirrors break and the roles dissolve, you are left only with yourself, and in that space, for the first time, something real can be observed. Not celebrated, not fixed, just seen. You, without decoration, without demand. And though the sight is humbling, it is also freeing. You begin to sense that life is not a path, but a repetition. The years do not carry you forward. They carry you deeper into the same questions, the same patterns, the same ache. What changes is not the world, but your way of seeing it. The child believes in joy. The youth believes in progress. The adult believes in purpose. But the one who has seen through these veils believes in nothing, and this belief in nothing is not despair, but release. For to believe in nothing is to be free of disappointment. When you expect no justice, no salvation, no permanence, you meet reality on its own terms. You no longer argue with what is. You no longer try to bend the universe to your comfort. You learn to bow, not out of defeat, but out of alignment with truth. The bowed soul is not broken, it is simply done pretending. Even time itself begins to shed its illusions. You once counted your life in milestones, achievements, relationships, transitions. Now you measure it in something quieter, the weight of an hour, the breath of a morning, the slow erosion of desire. You do not rush, there is nowhere to get to. The destination was always an invention of the will. And when the will dims, what remains is presence, bare and unspectacular. Pain does not vanish, it sharpens. It becomes less dramatic, more intimate. You feel it without story, without blame. A raw nerve beneath the surface of everything. Even joy carries its shadow, because you no longer cling to it. You watch joy pass, like a visitor, knowing it will not stay. and you let it go without grasping. This is not indifference. It is reverence without ownership. You no longer believe that anything is yours. Relationships, too, are transformed. You do not enter them to be saved. You no longer seek fusion, completion, or escape. You share space. You share silence. You watch the other suffering without trying to fix it. You are no longer intoxicated by the dream of being understood. You understand that misunderstanding is inevitable, that each soul is a separate chamber of longing, sealed off by its own pain. And yet, in that separation, there is a strange tenderness. Compassion emerges, not as emotion, but as stillness in the face of another's anguish. You do not speak unless words are needed. You do not project your will onto them. You simply remain present. Without design, this is the highest love the awakened can offer. Not salvation, not intensity, but presence without agenda. The love that asks nothing, and in asking nothing, allows the other to exist fully in all their unrest. Spirituality, once filled with promise, now feels like another architecture of escape. The rituals, the doctrines, the meditations, all attempts to give shape to the void. But the void cannot be shaped. It can only be seen. The more you strip away, the more sacred the ordinary becomes. A leaf trembling in wind, a voice cracking under grief, a shadow cast on stone. These things speak more clearly than theologies. Their truth is unadorned. You do not seek the divine. You witness the absence. You do not chase enlightenment. You grow accustomed to darkness. And in that darkness, your eyes adjust not to light, but to reality. The divine is not elsewhere. It is the silence that remains when the self dissolves. It does not answer. It does not guide. It does not comfort. But it is there in the same way that death is there, quietly, inevitably, without need of belief. Death no longer looms as enemy. It becomes the final mirror, not a threat, but a companion reminding you that all this, too, will pass. Your name, your face, your memories, your grief, all will vanish. And in knowing this, what once seemed urgent becomes trivial. What once wounded you now feels distant, softened by the vastness of impermanence. Death is not the end. It is the release from striving. And in that release, the will finds its only true silence. You begin to live as if you have already died. Not in morbid resignation, but in clarity. You no longer accumulate. You no longer impress. You no longer seek to prolong the story. You begin to disappear gently from the center of your own narrative, and what remains is quiet movement, a soft presence in the world. You walk, you speak, you sleep, not to fulfill, but simply to exist. The grand gesture fades, the simple act remains. In this state, meaning is not sought, it is witnessed in its absence. You no longer need life to mean anything, you simply live it. The burden of interpretation falls away. You do not ask what this pain means or what this joy is for. You allow them their space. You learn the language of silence, of being without explanation, of existing without need of story. And slowly, imperceptibly, something shifts, not toward ecstasy, but toward equanimity. You do not ascend, you sink deeper into being, into the weight of flesh, the fragility of thought, the transience of form. And this descent, far from tragic, becomes the only peace that cannot be stolen, because it asks nothing, it clings to nothing, it simply is. You are not healed, you are not saved, you are not transformed, you are only still. And that stillness, finally, is enough. The final veil is the softest. It does not tear with violence, but dissolves like mist. No revelation comes, no light floods in, only the gradual dimming of desire, the last murmur of the will settling into silence. You have searched every corner, every promise, every shadow, and you have found nothing, not as emptiness, but as release. The nothing that remains when all illusions have finished their speaking. You no longer reach for meaning. You watch it pass like wind across tall grass. The soul no longer demands narrative, it accepts transience. The story does not end, it vanishes. Not with closure, but with the disinterest of a candle burning low. You are not the author, you are not the protagonist. You are the flicker between frames, the silence between notes, the space untouched by craving. Time, once a tyrant, becomes a soft companion. You feel its breath in your bones, not as urgency, but as rhythm. The days no longer build. They fall like snow, quiet, indifferent, beautiful in their impermanence. There is no arc to ascend, no height to reach. You are no longer becoming. You are simply vanishing moment by moment, gesture by gesture, into the stillness that underlies all motion. People pass through you like ghosts. Their words echo, but no longer bind. You listen, but do not absorb. You witness, but do not tether. Their joys do not stir your longing. Their sorrows do not resurrect your hope. You feel them, but you do not follow. You walk among them as one already departed, not cold, but detached from the gravity that once pulled you into their orbit. Their illusions are no longer yours to bear. The body ages, and you do not resist. Its decline feels like the slow loosening of a rope. Pain visits more often, but it no longer startles. It sits beside you, a companion in the long waiting. You do not wish it away. You feel its shape, its message, but you no longer name it. It is not enemy or lesson. It is sensation, unadorned. You wear it as you wear the air, involuntary, indifferent, complete. You watch the trees, the passing of seasons, the crumbling of stone, and you do not assign them metaphor. They no longer symbolize. They simply exist. And in their existence is truth. The tree does not wish to be more than tree. The stone does not grieve its erosion. You envy them, not for their simplicity, but for their absence of will. You see now that consciousness is not privilege, it is burden. Awareness does not elevate, it exposes. And yet you remain, not out of duty, not out of purpose, simply because breath continues. And that breath is not yours, it happens through you, without your command. Life no longer feels like possession, it is process, a current. You are no longer the swimmer, you are the water, moving without will, falling into ocean without resistance. Death, once a horizon, becomes a nearness. You do not anticipate it, you do not dread it. It is already here, in every passing moment. You are always dying slightly, quietly, with each fading second. And in that slow dying, there is gentleness, not the violence of end, but the mercy of release. To die is not to cease, it is to rest. To drop the mask of self and vanish into the nameless. You do not say goodbye. You do not leave behind. You do not hope to be remembered. Legacy, meaning, continuity. These are the dreams of the unawakened. You no longer desire to echo. You desire only to dissolve, like a drop returning to the ocean. No distinction, no remainder, no trace. The will, long your master, now lies quiet. It breathes, but does not shout. It waits, but no longer commands. It is seen for what it is, a fire without end, beautiful in its cruelty, sacred in its suffering. And now it flickers low, not extinguished, but no longer consuming. You sit beside it, finally unburned. And so, the last words are not spoken, they are felt. They rise, not as climax, but as whisper. Nothing has been solved. Nothing has been won. You have only stopped fleeing. You have only stopped needing. And in that stillness, in that absolute renunciation, you find the softest clarity. There is nothing to fix, nothing to seek, nothing to hold. Only this, and even this, passing.